Hi guys, Stéphane here on the French Cooking Academy. And if you were here last week, you will know we are doing a sauces series. We've started with the pan sauces last week. This week we're continuing talking about classic standalone sauces. In this episode we're going to see the difference between the two and between the pan sauce and the classic sauce, what are the components and techniques that comes into play. And I'm going to share with you one of my go-to secret weapons that I use to make an excellent brown sauce base, aka demi-glace. More on that later, without breaking a sweat. And this recipe is actually part of our book, so you better watch this one. Let's go. Now, we cannot talk about classic sauces without mentioning the dreaded word matter sauces and their derivative, which is extremely always a topic that is really confusing. So what I've done, I've written an article about it and I've put a link in the video description because I don't want to talk about this in this episode. What I want to talk about is the things that I've learned across the time when I've studied the world of sauces. And I've made a whole course about it. So I kind of know things or two about sauce making now. And one thing I've realized that at home, there are really a few key elements that are important and that are realistically usable and easy to use in a home kitchen. Okay? So, and this is what I want to talk with you. But before we dive into this, let's look at the difference between the pan sauces and the classic sauces. So, what is the difference? The pan sauce is a sauce that is using the sauté déglacé technique, okay, that we've seen. So you sear your steak, you deglaze with wine, you add stock, you reduce, and then you serve. It is a fast and quick sauce made to order. The classic sauce, on the other hand, does not require any of that searing, doesn't require a piece of meat, and it is just crafted there and then on its own, but it can be made before the service. And it is made with, it can be stocks mixed with velouté, can use different techniques, different ingredients, and it can be made in larger batches. So if we take the example of a Bordelaise sauce, for instance, before the service in a restaurant, someone is going to make the reduction with vinegar, with herbs, with red wine, and add the stock, reduce the thing, prepare the sauce, and the sauce, when it's ready, is going to be sitting here at the ready when the service is coming in as an order for a steak, and for instance, a filet mignon or something, or Chateaubriand with a Bordelaise sauce. It's gonna maybe grill the steak and then take a bit of sauce, up, and that's it. These are the classic sauces. Pan sauces, it is not made before it's ordered. Okay, that's the main difference. Okay, now, when it comes to the components that comes into the making of classic sauces, they're quite wide, as I said. There's a lot of things we could be talking about. So what I'm gonna show you now is really, let's say, the 4 things that I found are really, really useful. Picture on the screen. Now, as you can see on the screen, these elements are surely not foreign. You got the white stock, you got the seafood stock or the fish fumé, the brown stock, the demi-glace, and the velouté. All of which, by the way, are included in our techniques, in our upcoming book, because you've been asking me, what is in the table of content? I can't tell you, but yes, these things are part of it. But what I want to talk about here is the demi-glace, which is really the one that kind of sits at the odd one out. What is a demi-glace? It is a stock that has been enriched with meat trimmings, with some carrots, some onion, thyme, a bit of wine, thickened with flour. It's been reduced to a semi-syrupy consistency until it becomes almost a sauce. And I'm saying almost because the demi-glace is actually a component, a sauce base that you use in order to quickly craft all kinds of brown sauces. And in the book from Anthony Bourdin called Léal, this is what he had to say about the demi-glace. This is the good and truly useful thing you want for sauces. Every single chef has some form of jus, as we call it in French, or demi-glace, and which is that sauce base sitting on the side of the bench so that when they have an order and they want to make a sauce, they don't bother with all the nitty-gritty, they just add the final touches very quick, the final flavor, the final reduction, the touch of spirit, etc. This is how professional sauces are being made. And this is really what I want to demonstrate as well in this video. So let's get going. The technique I'm going to share with you here will allow you to transform any pre-made store-bought stocks or cooking stocks such as this. This is a liquid form thing I got in my supermarket, okay? And you're gonna be able to transform this in either a very good brown stock or a demi-glace. When I'm mentioning the term demi-glace, I'm not pretending on saying this is the professional thing you've got in a restaurant and the real demi-glace. I've renamed this the home-style demi-glace on purpose. This is my version that I have adapted to make it really home cooking friendly. Any store-bought stock can be used. Veal stock will use will yield the best taste, and we always use veal stock in French cooking, but you can use beef stock, chicken stock, and lamb stock depending on what you're making. So obviously veal stock, you're going to tend towards something quite meaty. If it's purely chicken, you can use chicken stock. If it's something with lamb, you'd rather use lamb stock, and so on and so forth. This is going to be the key element that's going to accelerate everything and provide lots of flavor. Now let's look at the other ingredients we're going to combine with this to make the magic happen. Now, one of the things that I've tried to do throughout the book that we've made is to make sure that all the recipe, or almost all the recipe, only requires stuff you're going to find in your supermarket. So here, for that technical demi-glace, we need the store-bought stock. You can find this on your supermarket or in the deli. And for the rest, let's have a look. A tablespoon of onion, a tablespoon of carrot, a bay leaf, a piece of thyme, a teaspoon of tomato paste, a tablespoon of flour. I've toasted the flour here in a dry pan so it doesn't give that whitish color. It brings you a nutty, roasty flavor. Some peppercorns, a bit of wine. This is white wine. You can use red wine or port or whatever you like. And these are pieces of chicken that I've cut off. What are these pieces of chicken? This is another trick that I'm doing. Anytime you buy a whole chicken, you can break it down, use the pieces for any recipe, and I've chopped here all the carcass and the wings, and I'm using this to make that sauce-based stock or demi-glace. That stock or demi-glace can be used and stored in the fridge for several days and frozen for up to 3 months. So it is really handy and it brings absolutely zero waste. Okay, so now let's go on the stove and let me show you how we're going to do it. So here we are on the stove. The first thing we're going to do is to sear or brown the pieces of chicken. And this is the same concept as we've used in the sauté de glacé. Remember, you sear your steak to have these caramel juices. When you make these sauce bases or any stocks or demi-glace, it is the same principle. You need to have that kind of meaty taste. So because we've got a store-bought stock, we're going to try to claim back this meaty flavor, and that's why I'm using all these offcuts of chicken. So the first thing, medium to high heat, and we're going to, let that oil heat up. I'm starting on a medium to medium high. You don't need to go excessively high. I like to bring the temperature bit by bit, okay? If your pan is too small, take a larger pan. You don't want to overcrowd everything. So you see I'm using a mini stock pot, and I'm going to spend a good 10 to 12 minutes browning these things, and I'm going to raise the heat after too high when it's going to start to sizzle. After 5 minutes, when I've got a little bit of color, I'm going to crank up the heat and I'm going to keep on cooking this until it's really almost dark brown. You don't want to burn anything, but you want to make sure that your piece of chicken is really well seared and you got a maximum of caramel juices at the bottom of the pan in there. Okay, so I'll show you how it looks like when it's done. The browning process will take you about 12 up to maximum 15 minutes, but roughly speaking, this is what I've got. These are the kind of color, and you see the bottom of the pan is nice and brown. That's the most important, and this is what you want. So I'm going to reserve my pieces of chicken here on the side into a sieve to drain the excess oil, and we're going to continue. Once you're done with this, the same as the sauté de glacé, remember we have the shallot. What do we do here? It's a bit different. A medium heat, and I'm gonna cook this just for a minute or two in my pan, and that's gonna capture all of the leftover oil. Don't put your heat too high because it might burn, and really just a minute, even a minute is enough, just to release these flavors in there. Very nice. I'm gonna follow by adding a little bit of tomato paste. You can add up to 1 or 2 teaspoons to give a bit of color, and we cook the tomato paste to remove the acidity, and then we're gonna deglaze. Very simple. For the wine, we can use up to 50 ml if we want. Make sure we got a good deglazing and capture everything. That's going to reduce the heat. I'm reducing the heat. And on a medium heat, see immediately we're getting that little base. So you can see the color already? Very nice. And we have done nothing yet. So as usual, we're going to reduce just until there's maybe 1 or 2 teaspoons left of wine. When it's nice and syrupy, what you need to do, take the chicken, put it back, and we're gonna mix everything and stir everything through, and then add a little bit of flour in there because we're gonna want to make a bit of a thickened stock. The demi-glace has to be thick, so to win time we use a bit of flour. I'm now gonna add my toasted flour. So remember, toasted flour is not giving that white aspect. The taste of the flour has been cooked, and instead of a floury taste, you get a nutty, roasty taste. Okay. Look at these lovely colors. I've got my stock on here. Remember, this is the store-bought stock, and I've got 500 ml, I think, which is about 2 cups. If you want, you can top up with a little bit of water, for instance, if you make just a stock. But I might leave it there because we're going to make a quick version. I'm raising my heat. I want to bring this to a very light boil, and then we're going to leave it to reduce on the simmer. But to add some flavor, I'm adding a few peppercorns, a few branches of thyme from the garden, nothing special, a bay leaf, and there's a controversial thing here, which is one thing that the new chefs are doing, is to add a tiny weeny bit of so rock salt is really a few grains, just to kind of release those flavor. And that's about it. Let's wait for the boil to come here. So my stock here, which at the moment hasn't been reduced, it's still a stock, is now coming to a simmer. We're now gonna do the reduction, the same thing as we've done with the pan sauces. And depending on what you want to have, if you want a stock to use to braise meat or whatever, you're gonna reduce just by maybe a quarter or something like this. For the demi-glace at home, the minimum reduction is by half. You reduce by half to really get to that semi-syrupy. The professional word, reduce by 3/4, which I think it's really extreme because you end up with no sauce left. So here's this example for kind of a demi-glace, a home-style demi-glace. You start with 2 cups of pre-made stock, and after reduction, we're gonna end up with 1 stock. So I'm gonna leave this, I'm gonna reduce my heat, leave this to simmer, and let it to reduce, and that's about it. After about 20 minutes of reduction, if I'm going towards the demi-glace territory, I am done. This is what I've got. I'm gonna filter this through a fine mesh sieve, put this into another pan so we can look at what we've got here, what we've yielded, which is the end result. My home-style demi-glace has been filtered, and I've left it a little bit thinner just to show you and to yield a bit more in the pan. And this is what I've got. Look at this intense brown color. This is about 30 to 35 minutes of work, and you can use that sauce base when you make, for instance, a pan sauce. You can reduce it a bit more to have it really semi-syrupy for a standalone sauce, and you can have it thinner but reduce it a bit less to use for anything like a ragu, braised meat, and that sort of things. A lot of people, when they see a stock, when it comes to recipes, like, oh my god, no, I'm not gonna make my own stock, I'm gonna spend the whole day, I have to buy bones and stuff like this. Not anymore. Right. And this is what you're gonna find, or one of the recipes from our book, in the technical section. And just to tell you, there's plenty of other pan sauces that are in there, plus a few standalone sauces for you to enjoy. So there we have it, the home-style demi-glace has been revealed. It is my secret weapon, and it is such a useful thing to have. You can make a stock, you can make a demi-glace, and that opens the door to all kinds of dishes and sauces that you can make. And to demonstrate that, next week we're going to use that home-style demi-glace, and we're going to be making one classic sauces, one of these standalone sauces, to see the difference, what the difference between the pan sauce, the classic sauces, and how to make them. But with that trick, you will see that things become extremely easy, and that's gonna open even more doors to your culinary horizon. I hope to see you next week on the Confidential series. Take care, bye bye.